Hello aspirants and welcome again to Legacy IAS Academy. In this lecture, we will be discussing about the recently concluded free trade agreement between India and New Zealand. Now, concluded does not mean that it has been signed and is in force. Of course, that's going to take a couple of months because that needs to be, proof checked, so on and so forth. However, the discussions have been concluded between India and New Zealand, and the outcome of it is that India and New Zealand aim to double their trade in the coming 5 years. So let us understand as to what this free trade agreement is all about. What is India going to get and what is India going to give to New Zealand at the end of this? Who is going to be the major beneficiary of the two? See, because the deals need not necessarily be exactly even. So is India going to get something more out of it, or is it New Zealand that is going to get something out of it? All this and much more is what we will discuss in today's video. So let's get started first with the news, and the news is about India and New Zealand concluding their negotiation with respect to the free trade agreement. As I mentioned, their objective is to double the bilateral trade in the next 5 years. If you look at the trade between India and New Zealand, here it is. So India exports presently, the very recent data suggests that in 2024-25, India has exported around $711 million, whereas imports in India from New Zealand is slightly less than $600 million. That means India is having a trade surplus of $123 million. That means we are earning foreign exchange from New Zealand in a net manner. However, if you look at historically, it is not that high, because in 2021-22, again, we had $112 million of surplus. It reduced a bit, but then it increased to $203 million. So now again, there has been a decrease. So, however, if you look at it, generally India is having a trade surplus with New Zealand. That is one thing. But another thing you can look at it is that the trade between the two countries is not much. We are having round about $1.3 billion worth of trade only. So this is what the two countries are planning to double. But of course, we are in surplus. Now, the very good thing about this negotiation was that it concluded quite soon. Round about 9 months is what it took to conclude the trade or the free trade agreement between India and New Zealand. Now, the question is, what is free trade agreement? So this is a level of integration. So different countries are integrated to different level with each other. It starts right from the preferential. In fact, even before preferential trade agreement, there will be early harvest schemes trying to improve or facilitate trade. But the major thing comes with preferential trade agreement, that is PTA. In preferential trade agreement, the countries try to lower the tariff barriers that are there. Now, when it comes to free trade agreement, this is a higher degree of integration as compared to preferential trade agreement. So what happens in free trade agreement is you are going to reduce the tariff barriers, but in addition to this, you are also going to reduce the non-tariff barriers as well. So what is tariff barrier? Tariff barrier is nothing but like a tax imposed or a duty imposed or a fees that is charged when you are allowing the other country's goods into your own country. That is the tariff barrier. Now, because of imposing such fees, less amount of goods are going to come in our country from some other country. But this is monetary. That is why tariff. There is a concept of non-tariff barrier in which again the country is going to restrict the imports from other countries, but not by using fees or monetary measures, but by non-monetary measures. For example, sanitary, phytosanitary restrictions, quota restrictions, which are not related to money but indirect restrictions. So those are non-tariff barriers. So in a free trade agreement, even that is reduced. All right. Moving ahead, let's see what are the key provisions of it. So when it comes to New Zealand, zero duty excess on 100% of tariff lines for Indian exports. So for the Indian exports, this is what is going to happen. 100% of tariff lines means the things on which 100% of tariffs were there. India, on the other hand, tariff reduction of on 70% tariff lines. So on the 70% tariff lines, there is going to be tariff reduction. This covers around about 95% of the bilateral trade. When it comes to the dairy products, so dairy products are being excluded because it is sensitive. Dairy products, if you talk about, it takes place during under the mixed farming regime. Under mixed farming regime, the farmers also have dairy farms on their farmland in order to support their income. So if we allow a lot of New Zealand dairy products into India, it is going to harm their earning capacity. Of course, we do have big industries like Mother Dairy, like Amul, so on and so forth, which are big industries, but we also need to protect our small farms that are there. Moving ahead, if you look at the trade asymmetry, if you look at average tariffs, so average Indian tariffs, average tariffs that India is imposing on New Zealand as of now is 16.2%, whereas average tariff New Zealand is imposing on India is just 2.3%. So it clearly looks at that New Zealand is probably, so it should be India, New Zealand is probably going to get majority of the benefit because their tariffs were already low, India's tariffs were high, which will now be reduced, so it's going to help New Zealand. But we'll see what India will get out of it. Over 58% of New Zealand tariff lines are already duty free. So this is already good from the New Zealand side. So maybe New Zealand has more to gain over here. However, in addition to the trade benefit, India is going to gain something else, and that is really important. What is that? The investment commitment. So New Zealand has committed around $20 billion of investment in the next 15 years. Now remember, our trade with New Zealand is just around $1.3 billion and we have to double it in the next 5 years. So it is going to become $2.6 billion in the next 5 years. But New Zealand has committed $20 billion, which is, if you consider it, compare it with the trade amount, it is quite a considerable amount in the next 15 years that New Zealand is going to invest in India. So that is something that is good. Next is the service, mobility and education provisions. So that is something that New Zealand is going to allow us. It is going to remove numerical caps that are done there on the Indian students. Working rights, it will provide minimum 20 hours per week during the study. Indians can go there and study and work as well. And post-study work visas will also be there up to 3 years for STEM and up to 4 years for the doctorates. So these are certain benefits which India is going to get. Addressing the non-tariff barriers. So non-tariff barriers, of course, have also been addressed over here. There are enhanced regulatory cooperation and transparency, because many a times these non-tariff barriers are imposed on the whims and fancies of the countries, which might not be acceptable to the others. So here more transparency is there, more streamlining of the process is there, so that arbitrary non-tariff barriers are not imposed. If you look at the strategic significance for India, it gives us access to high income country, which is New Zealand, and rule-based Pacific economy access is what we are going to get. Now, if we look at what New Zealand will get out of it, so of course India is the fastest growing major economy of the world. The market of India is very high. India's population is quite high, which makes it such an attractive market for any country whatsoever. Hence, New Zealand is also going to get those benefits from India, specifically knowing that India's average tariff was approximately 16%, whereas New Zealand was just around about 2.3, 2.5%. So how much can they lower? They can make completely zero. That will also be a very less decrease, but India's were already high, so India is going to help a lot. Plus, diversification of opportunities for New Zealand with respect to education, tourism, etc. So when Indian students are going to go to study in New Zealand, for example, of course Indian students are benefited, but at the same time the economy of New Zealand is also benefited. The institution or the university fees, the demand is going to increase, so on and so forth. Plus, as far as India is concerned, India has ensured that the dairy sector, because New Zealand is quite powerful in the dairy sector and India has excluded the dairy sector from New Zealand's free trade agreement. So we have managed to protect our dairy sector. We have managed to get certain benefits. We have managed to get the investments. We have managed to get the benefits for our students. At the same time, New Zealand is majorly going to get the benefits of the tariff that has been reduced. And this was all done quite swiftly within 9 months itself, which is a very positive indicator. So this is overall a quite balanced free trade agreement that is going to mutually benefit both the countries. Thank you.